All right, welcome back to GK Repair Talk. This is episode 3. Brandon, we're now 3 episodes in, and we have an audience, a small audience, but an audience. And according to our statistics, 83% of our audience is 18 to 22 years old. So we have a young audience. And that kind of got me thinking about what kind of topic we could talk about. And I think this episode should be dedicated to the 18 to 22-year-olds and really anyone who is thinking about fixing their device professionally and they want to get in to our business. Or maybe they have an interest in IT and they're going to go to school for IT and they want to know, should they come and work for a company like we work for, Assurion or CPR, or if they want to work for, Best Buy or Apple as a Genius or something like that. You and I specifically have worked for, Assurion and the company previously known as U-Break iFix, which operates a lot like a CPR. So we'll talk about that in life as a technician, as an entry level technician who fixes iPads and cell phones. So, what are some questions that you think we should answer for our younger audience?
So I think you went over the topic.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about what it's like in the life of an entry level mobile technician.
Mm-hmm.
So is this going to be a good option for people pursuing an IT education? You touched on that.
So I touched on it a little bit. The answer to that, I think, would be yes. You and I have hired students before, people who are looking to go into IT, or people just looking at any kind of technical background, including, application development or software development. Working for a place like Assurion or a CPR, and getting some tech background, I think can be very beneficial for anyone who's looking to pursue an IT career later. If I've personally have done a lot of hires myself, and so I could speak as a hiring manager right now. If I'm the head of a IT department for any company, and I have 2 resumes I'm looking at, both are newly graduated, security professionals, and they just got their degrees in internet security or certifications in internet security. They spent 2 years doing that, 4 years doing that, and one of them worked for CPR for 4 years while he was going to school. The other candidate worked at McDonald's for 4 years while he was going to school. I'd have to say that the person who's got the tech background probably has a leg up. I mean, both people are probably going to get interviews. But yeah, the person who worked at CPR is going to have a little bit of an advantage, right? He's got that tech background. So, not to mention if you are interested in any kind of like app development, or if you think like I do, and you think that mobile devices are the way of the future, as tablets get better and more, more and more ready to replace computers, cell phones too, being able to repair those is going to be valuable for companies in the future. So, yeah, I think that's a good question, and I would say, yeah, it absolutely would be a benefit to you.
Yeah, I think you're right, and it's one thing that's worth adding is this is kind of fun to work in a tech field, while you're pursuing that kind of education. You get some like-minded people that it's just enjoyable to bounce ideas off of and have people that have similar passions. So
Yeah.
I'd say most people in the repair industry have some sort of aspiration of that kind. So
I would agree with that. Yeah, 100%. So I'm going to ask you a question, Brandon.
Okay.
So, is experience necessary
In order to get a job in
to
repair in the
because you're in it, you're doing hires right now.
right.
That's your job. So if I am 18 and I'm just out of high school and I got a passion for fixing electronics, is that going to hinder me from getting a job with you?
So you're someone who's in electronics right
So
now.
I'm into electronics, but I have no experience professionally fixing them.
So the funny thing is, and you probably know the answer, but is that because you've done the hiring
Mm-hmm.
as well, you've done the same job. So we agree on this. The funny thing is that it not only does it not, well, I would say it doesn't matter, but it does. In fact, it's the opposite. For whatever reason, it tends to be something we avoid to hire people with tech backgrounds. I mean, depending on what the tech background is, but a person with a tech background might actually be a worse hire than someone without it. I'd rather look for someone who has an interest and a passion rather than someone with previous tech experience.
Mm-hmm.
So that
Yeah,
kind of answers that.
yeah, I agree 100%. When I was looking for entry level tech positions to hire for those positions, I was looking for people who didn't have experience. Um, so if you're 18 to 22 and you just have a passion but no actual experience, don't let that deter you from applying at
Definitely
all.
not.
Both your and my experience has been it's much easier to take a brand new person who knows nothing and give them good behaviors right off the bat than it is to take someone who's got experience or training from another company that maybe received training that either wasn't good or was just
Yep.
so radically different from the way you and I were trained on certain things,
Yep.
um, that you'd have to break their habits. So you have to have them unlearn what they have trained before with, and then they have to learn your way. And a lot of times that leads to people not sticking around. Our turnover rate,
Well, in our experience,
yeah,
all the time.
all the
So,
time, yeah.
right.
So
And
yeah, it's so 4 years I worked for that company. None of our previous experienced hires lasted longer than 6 or 7 months.
we'll give a special shout
And
out to Fernando
special
if he
shout out.
watches this.
So special, yes. So Fernando, great guy, good technician. Left after I think
5 months, I think, right?
I think it was 6 months,
Six.
6 months,
Yeah.
um, but he lasted the longest and by far the longest. Most most of the guys that we hired that worked at like the repair shop down the road, they lasted less than a month.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of that has to do with the fact that for the longest time there was no standard when it came to doing repairs. If you want to get into IT and you want to work on computers, right? There's all sorts of different certifications that you can get, right? And so like the gold standard education and certification that you can get to work on computers is your A+ certification. So there is a standard when it comes to PC IT repair work. When it comes to um, the cell phone industry and tablets, up until this like last year, with the WISE certifications, there wasn't any kind of industry standard when it comes to certifications, right? So um, every single place that you go to, and even now, pretty much every single place that you would go to is going to train differently versus um, the place that they're competing with down the road. If you work at like an Assurion or something like that, their training's a lot more standardized, but industry wide, there really isn't any kind of standard.
Okay. I'd like to add a clarification there, though,
Okay.
an important one.
Yeah.
If you're looking into getting into repair, and I would say, like you talked about educate or certifications. If you've got an A+, or you're looking to get an A+, or if you've gone to school, if I have some great hires with that kind of experience, non technical or non work experience, just educational experience. People that have passion, people that came from IT tech or whatever it is. I think a lot of good hires have came out of that. People that are studying for technical type things, but haven't had any actual work experience.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say that's a pretty good pool of people to hire from.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. If you're listening to this podcast or watching it on YouTube, and you're a hiring manager, you, I would say if you're looking for good people to hire on, it's really good to go to like your local community college. Or yeah, I don't think is ITT Tech still a thing. I don't think it is anymore.
well,
But
whatever it is, I know
yeah,
I
some of the
whatever the
technical colleges,
right.
um,
I think that's where Josh went.
yeah.
So, but
So great places to recruit from. Yeah, because having that educational background is very useful. You just have to give
yeah,
them the proper physical skill set to do it
and,
professionally.
and if you're someone looking to get hired, just know that's something that might be looked for from a hiring manager,
Hmm.
not looked down upon like previous tech experience. I
Yeah,
would say.
yeah. Previous tech experience. Yeah, yeah. Our experience is that it doesn't help you get a job with us. But yeah, if you are definitely pursuing or had pursued or
Education.
are pursuing, IT as a profession and you're getting educated in it, then that's definitely a leg up.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and then yeah, you combine the two together, right? You're going to college to get your bachelor's in computer science. Add 4 years or 3 years of experience with Asurion or with CPR. That's exactly what hiring managers are going to be looking for in the career field for IT. So
Mm.
you can add your you know actual professional tech experience with your tech education by the time you graduate, and things look pretty good for you. And we had a lot of people who were doing that. I can think of Eric as one of the guys that you and I
Yeah.
worked with, and Andrew too, who's currently in college. They they're going to go far in life.
Yeah.
Smart guys, and
Mm.
they're using Asurion to bolster their resume while they go to college to pursue programming. So,
So moving on a little bit,
yep.
another question I'll ask you is, we talked about training.
Mm-hmm.
So if we don't need experience if you're a person wanting to get hired in the repair industry, if you don't need experience, what are we gonna what is that person gonna look at for what can they expect for training? What does training look like for them?
Mm-hmm. So, yeah. So experience is definitely not necessary um, because companies like ours do all the training, and so you get a combination of hands-on training. Every place is going to look a little bit different. So Brandon and myself worked for a franchise that owned several stores that were U-Brick iFix stores, now Shurions. Um, and when I originally got hired on at that place, we were an independent repair. And so as an independent repair shop, you're getting probably only hands-on training, right? You have a manager or an owner above you, and they are literally handing you, broken devices and that they own, and you're fixing them over and over and over again. So you're getting it physically hands-on. If you get into other larger places like Ubreak iFix / Asurion, CPR, Best Buy, Geek Squad, or as a Genius, you're going to get both hands-on training. You're also going to get virtual training as well. In addition to that, you're going to get training with whatever and from whoever partnership agreements that you might have or that company might have. So for us, we were trained. We had official Apple training material. We had official Samsung training material. Google training material. And so, I would say that the hardest part of a brand new technician coming into a place like Shurion is that the first few days or a couple weeks of training, where you sit in front of a computer for hours at a time, trying to absorb a lot of information, and then taking tests after that. It's, to be honest, not the greatest system, but if you can get through it and know that things will make sense after you actually start physically touching the devices versus just reading what's on the screen and trying to memorize acronyms like Okta. Yeah. So, but all these places are going to provide training for you, and everyone learns at their own pace. So if you're new and you get hired on, and it's been 3 days and you feel like you're not picking it up, that's okay. We had several guys who picked it up right away, and several people who took literally months before they got really good at doing repairs.
I think I was one of them. So
Brandon was
the latter.
Brandon was a special case. He was a bit of a special case. It took him a bit, but in fairness to Brandon, Brandon was hired on to be a remote technician, and so he didn't have anybody looking over his shoulder telling him what he's doing wrong. He was out in a van figuring everything out himself. So, but yeah, training is going to be there. It's going to be provided. It's going to look differently for any and every company that you might get hired on with.
So how about tools?
So
bring my own tools, are they provided?
So I would say specifically in the tech field, tools are going to be provided for you. Now, if you're in the automotive industry, you typically within the industry you provide your own tools. At least that's how it was when I worked on cars. Now, tools are going to be provided if you go and work at like a place like an Assurion or a Geek Squad or whatever. But I will recommend, and this is based off of my automotive experience, when tools are provided for you and for everyone else, typically it's not like they're going to just assign you tools. It's going to be a community kind of grab and go for tools. So places will have workstations that you go and that's where you fix the device. Well, it might be you sharing your workstation, right? And you might be sharing several workstations, which means you're never using the same tool every day, or a bunch of you are using the same tool every day. And so when you have this kind of community grab all for tools, in my opinion, it can actually be a bit detrimental. And the reason for that is if you're using a screwdriver over and over and over again, especially a specialized screwdriver for these small, tiny screws, those screwdrivers are going to wear very, very quickly. And that is going to lead to strip screws. Most places, because they're providing tools, they're not providing the best quality tools. They're just looking to get bulk, cheap tools, right? So they can buy 10 at a time, super cheap, have them in a drawer. When one screwdriver breaks, you go in, you grab the next cheap one. Yep. So Brandon and I have both seen this.
Yep.
And it's not great, because if you're, depending on the device, if you strip a screw, that might end that repair attempt for you, or you're busting out the Dremel, and either way, the day just got really, really challenging. In the automotive industry, you provide your own tools, and in my opinion, you're a better technician when you use your own tools, and they don't necessarily need to be the most expensive tools. When I worked on cars, you could go and you could, the Snap-on truck would stop by and you could spend, tens of thousands of dollars on tools. If you know any mechanics, especially journeyman mechanics, they probably have spent somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000 on just tools. The good news is if you want to fix cell phones, you don't need to spend $10,000 on tools. That being said, I think you should invest in your own tools, and use your own tools. They will wear.
That being said,
yep,
there is definitely better tools than others, but more
yes.
on that on another episode, I suppose.
So I think we did talk about it a little bit in the
yeah.
last episode about tools, right? iFixit-Kits and WeHaws versus the cheap things. But when you own your own tools, a couple things happen. First, your tools are going to wear a lot slower because only you are using them. The people and other technicians around you aren't using them unless you're letting them borrow it. But only you are going to be really using it, so they're not going to wear as quickly. The other thing is you get used to that tool, and so you'll feel the tension before you start stripping the screw, before it's too late, because you're familiar with that. And so I'll give an example again from my car days. One of the reasons why you should get your own tools is, even for something basic like a socket and a socket wrench, and doing something really basic like an oil change. When you are familiar with your socket wrench and the one that you specifically use for oil changes, you know that when you hand tighten the oil drain plug, exactly how far that you can go before things get bad. And for an oil change in that drain plug, it's literally one plug, it's one bolt. But if you're working on like a Honda Civic, that bolt threads right into the bottom of the engine block itself. If you over torque that, you can break the block. You can put a crack in the block. I've seen it happen, and that's a $6,000 mistake right there. So fortunately, in the cell phone industry, you're not going to make a $6,000 mistake by over torquing a screw.
Getting close.
Well, yeah, we're working our way there,
yeah.
right? You're the one with more experience than I do, fixing Galaxy flips and whatnot.
Right.
Those are expensive. But when it comes to stripping a screw, it's bad. So in the car industry, it's very easy. If you're using someone else's socket wrench, you might not know how much torque you can actually give that drain plug before something bad really happens. So in the same thing when it comes to working on cell phones, it's really nice to know if you go out, you get it doesn't have to be like an iFixit-Kit or a WeHa. As long as it's your own, you'll know where that point is. You'll be able to feel whether or not that screw is coming loose properly or not, and you're stripping it. It's harder if you're using just a grab bag, a screwdriver, and next thing you know, it's too late. The screw is stripped, and the customer who's anticipating getting their phone back in 35 minutes, well, now it's going to be an hour and 35 minutes, and maybe it's not going to be fixed at all. So
good advice.
Yeah, so that's my rant on tools.
How many repairs per shift should be expected?
So this is going to vary depending on who you work for and where you are. If there's something to be said about the industry that is fairly constant, it's that the seasons of repairs are very cyclical in nature, in the cell phone and tablet repair world. Typically, you're going to be busier in the summertime versus the wintertime, so you're going to see a lot more places hiring in the spring and summertime, because people are more active, and as people are more active, more phones get dropped, and that's the majority of the stuff that we see come in is broken phones from drops. So, from where we worked, a busy day, you could be, as one technician could do somewhere between like 8 and 12 repairs in a day. It's also going to depend on what you're repairing too, because if 12 Pixel 4 XLs come walking in and they all need new screens, one person's not going to fix 12 in a day. But the same token, if 12 iPhones walk in, one technician could do 12 iPhones in one shift. So it's really going to depend on what you're doing, and your location. Brandon was fortunate enough. We're in Seattle, and Brandon went to Florida last year and hung out at a couple of Florida stores for a bit. They were a lot busier than the stores that we worked at. Each technician was doing probably a repair an hour, 2 repairs per hour there. At some of our locations, we would have loved if they were doing 2 repairs an hour, and that just wasn't the case sometimes. So ultimately, it's going to depend on who you're working for, where your location is, and how busy that location is.
Unless you're Flash Tyler, then he's driving to 2 or 3 different locations and then getting them done.
So, yeah, Flash Gordon. Yeah, he was a remote tech and drove to locations and fixed them on site. And I've seen him do 12 in a day. That was a very long day for him, but it can be done. That's definitely not the usual though.
No,
for sure.
So is that it for the repairs? I guess it is. It can vary.
The only thing I was going to say is that if you do like the sound of this and you're like, man, I really love electronics and I really want to go to a place that fixes electronics, and because I as a kid I tore down my Nintendo and put it back together, that is great. I will set the expectation though on this podcast, like I did on several interviews that I did, and Brendan, you can vouch for me when I say this, because you and I have done dozens at this point of interviews together. I always would tell people that 90% of their job is fixing things, 10% of the job is doing other things, and usually that 10% is talking to clients, and it might be doing other things like inventory management or answering phones. But inevitably, people would get hired on after I tell them this, and then later on they tell me, I thought I was just going to sit in the back all day and never have to talk to people.
For that.
Yep. So you can't, you could be a total introvert and do well at this job. Just know that for just about every place that you're going to be working at, there is going to be some degree of customer service that you're going to have to do, whether it's talking on the phone with clients, or doing check-ins and receiving payment. There's usually a sales aspect to everything too, where you're offering things like accessories and and screen protectors. Depending on the location might have dedicated people that they're just customer facing people, and their technicians just busier locations. Yeah. And their technicians are going to tech, and their front end people are just going to be front end people. I would say that more often than not, that's more rare. Most places are going to have an expectation that you are going to be talking to clients at some point, and so you have to, when you just know that when you're getting hired on, that's not going to be just I sit down, I fix something for 8 hours, and then I go home. We live in a world right now where people don't like talking to other people. Just know that that's probably going to be an expectation. So that's all that I had for in-store. Now, there is the other aspect to our jobs and our companies, and that's doing on-site repair. And Brandon, you specifically could speak to on-site repair because that's what you were originally hired on for, and then later ran that department. So I'll ask you the questions. Fixing devices in a van where you go out to customers' homes or places of work and doing repairs on site versus in store. Um, what's the difference between the two?
Well, when you, it's perfect timing to bring this up because you were talking about having to have customer interactions, being introvert, and you do have to do that when you're on site, when you're a mobile technician, remote technician. You're gonna have to talk with people regardless of where you do repairs. But there is a definite feeling or sentiment or whatnot of autonomy in remote tech, and where it's just you most of the time. As you mentioned before earlier in this podcast about that was my beginning, not having a lot of people to lean on, but also not having a lot of people to be in my space. And so that has a certain appeal to it. I'll admit. And so if you're that kind of person, you might consider that side of things. It's quite nice. You kind of control a lot of aspects of your job, um, and so you do have to talk to someone, but a lot of that is at your own pace, um, and you're kind of choosing when and that sort of thing. You only deal with one customer at a time, which is really nice for an introvert.
Hmm.
You're not having to take a lot of multiple calls or deal with multiple people at once. So, yeah, that's what I would say about that. That's the biggest shock when you go from working um, mobile and on site to working in a store.
Hmm.
Um, if that
I think you preferred the van.
Yeah, there's a lot. I would say if you were to weigh all the pros and cons, which I haven't actually made a list or anything, so I've thought about that sort of thing. I would say I prefer most aspects of the van, but it does. I mean, without getting too much into a philosophical tangent, I've talked with a lot of people, and gleaned from their experiences as well, other than my own. And one thing there's a lot of benefits to work in the store also. One of those would be networking. Even if you don't like it, it's an important thing.
Hmm.
I remember on my first review, you put a lot. I got a lot of high marks, but one mark that was just right in the nothing to say about was what is it like? It's interaction with others or whatever that
Hmm.
field is,
Hmm.
and there was not much to say. It was what you say, like people think you're okay,
Yeah.
like from the few moments they've talked to you.
Right.
So there's not a lot of networking there, and so I would say if you're looking to move up in a company, you probably at some point need to have more experience, at least partially, in where you're working with people. So I think that's something important to say.
Yeah. I would say that the other probably biggest con to working in a van is probably the training or lack of training a lot of the times. Typically when they hire you on to do something like that, you get some in-store training first, and then they kick you out into a van. I know in your case specifically, you got like 2 weeks in the store, and then you're out in a van.
Yeah.
There's only so much training and knowledge that you can get within 2 weeks. Um,
Yep.
and so that led to a lot of phone calls to me, saying, I just encountered this problem, and me saying, yep, I've seen that 100 times. This is what you do. Okay, I'll do that. But even then, it's a lot easier for me when I'm training someone one on one. I can look over their shoulder and be like, nope, that's the wrong screw, or nope, that's not how you do that with the flex,
You
right?
can maybe catch it early.
Right.
Luckily, I was a cautious person.
Fortunately, because there were some others that weren't, right, and they're
Yes.
just like, here's this cable, and I think I sliced through it, and you're like, what? Um, it's a little bit more challenging when someone's on the phone and you're trying to explain something over the phone via visual, especially because there's so many different models of phones, and so they all are just a little bit different from the next, even within models like a iPhone 11 versus iPhone 12, right? But especially in like the Samsung world, trying to explain how to do a screen replacement on an S7 versus an S8, it's a completely different process. And so trying to explain that over the phone, like your phone tech support to a new technician, and you're trying to be patient, but they're there, and you're allotted like an hour to be there to do that repair, and they're 50 minutes in, and it's it can be stressful. Um, but once you get good, at the repairs, um, I enjoyed remote tech. You know,
Yeah.
so there were a couple there. I did a couple of shifts for the company, and the shift that I did down south in the Seattle area, I didn't like at all, mostly because of the traffic, but also because of the couple of
Same thing I
pixel
was thinking.
repairs. It was a couple of
Yep.
pixel, so a pixel. It was a Pixel 3 XL,
Pixel in Seattle on a hill.
a pixel in Seattle on a hill. So pixel repairs. It's not that they're difficult; it's that they're long. And so when you have a 3 o'clock appointment and it's a pixel, and you know that it's going to be an hour to 2 hours to do that repair, but you also have you're supposed to do a Samsung within a 2 hour time frame, right? Like a 3 to 5 job or something like that. And so at 3 o'clock you get to the Pixel job, and you're supposed to get to the Samsung job before 5 o'clock. And they're 3 towns over in the middle of traffic, the rush hour traffic. That's just it's not a great day. But at the same time, when the other shift that I did, where I went up north, and it was like iPhones all day, and it was like you have 8 hours to complete 8 iPhones. They're 15-minute jobs, and the hardest part about that job was going to places that are in the middle of nowhere and you don't have internet connectivity, right? So you can do the calibration software. Um, but for anyone who likes having some autonomy, for sure, and you kind of want to be your own boss, remote tech is kind of the way to go.
And it's probably the job of the future, really.
Yeah.
So
So the last thing that I have for today, and is things to consider. This is specific to remote tech, but we can get into pay a little bit. Um, Depending on where you're at and who you can latch on with, if you want to be a remote technician, you might end up with a company that pays W-2. But there's also opportunities with other companies that are hiring contractors. So you'd be a 1099 person and you'd be working for yourself. So I know, Brandon, you have a lot of experience with both managing and being a W-2 person, as well as managing 1099 people. What are some pros and cons and potential expenses that you saw?
yeah, so I mean, probably mostly obvious, but good to point out anyways. Even more autonomy with 1099. So that's if you're working for yourself, there's a lot more there as far as uh, uh, working for yourself and not for someone else. So that's nice. I didn't hear as much from an independent contractor than a W-2. So as a manager, there's probably a lot of nice things about that. There's also a lot of earning potential if you can work it out right. But the downside, the obvious downside, is that you're responsible for everything. Costs and things, and if business gets bad, you still have payments to make, and you can lose money. So it's work and lose money. I mean, that's a possibility if you're not W-2. So
yeah, especially if you're not getting jobs,
Yep.
and depending on the time of year, maybe you're getting too many jobs, maybe you're not getting enough jobs.
Yeah.
But you get
So you have to be proactive.
Yeah, but you get full autonomy, and typically as a 1099, your income potential is going to be a lot higher versus W-2.
Right.
But W-2, it's a much steadier pay, probably with benefits. So, um, and I mentioned pay a little bit. So remote techs typically, if you're a W-2 person, you're going to get more pay versus versus like an in-store technician, typically, especially an entry-level position. Usually it's by a couple of dollars per hour. Now, pay is going to, whether you're an in-store technician, a remote technician, pay is going to vary greatly depending on where you're at. Where you're at within the city. So Brandon and I, we're north of Seattle, and pay can be anywhere from $16 an hour up to $22 an hour. And the further inward towards Seattle you get, the higher the base pay is going to be. The further away you get, the lower the pay is going to be. But even within within our own company, really, my former company, but within Asurion, if you go and work at Asurion in Arizona or Asurion in Kentucky versus Asurion in Florida, you might be making $9 an hour as an entry level technician. So pay is gonna be all over the place. So it's not gonna be really any better or any worse than really any other entry level job anywhere. Right. Some people are gonna watch this video and be like, "With $16 an hour, I could go work at McDonald's and make $18 an hour." And yep. But I will tell you this: I would rather fix an iPhone than flip a burger. So, no disrespect to the people working at McDonald's, because I love McDonald's, but for anyone who's got a passion for fixing things and tinkering with things, this is even at a low hourly wage, it might be worth just the experience of doing that and coming to a job that's for the most part fun. So. So that's all we got this week for our podcast. So you can watch us on YouTube. You can also listen to us on Spotify, on Amazon Music, or on Apple Podcasts now as well. So tell your friends.
Yeah, and anywhere that there's comments, feel free to ask us any questions you have, whether it be tips that you need for the industry or whether it be maybe requests for future podcasts. We'd love to hear from you. So
yeah, absolutely. All right, that's all I got. Thanks for listening, everybody.